In 2022, Russia's invasion of Ukraine would ignite the biggest war in Europe since World War II. It was the world event of the year, what everyone was talking about. While the invasion garnered global attention, and for good reason, something else was happening towards the east, which went under the radar. This event was not as attention-grabbing, for bombs were not being dropped, but votes being cast. But an election can have even more significance, for if the right person is elected, it has the power of stopping death and destruction. On March 9, 2022, the Korean people chose Yoon Suk-yeol as their next president. Yoon's victory can have big ramifications for Northeast Asia, as South Korea is right in the middle of it. To the east lay Japan, its former colonial overlord, and to the west, China, an economic superpower. Then, to make matters more interesting, the Korean peninsula remains divided in half, with an authoritarian, nuclear-armed aggressive North Korea. Therefore, South Korea is important, and who leads the country even more so. Many describe Yoon as a maverick. He went from prosecuting former presidents to becoming one. In accordance with his party's long-held belief, he's placed an emphasis on a stronger US-South Korea alliance, with a hawkish stance towards North Korea. Yoon's foreign policy vision also seeks to take a more proactive role in the great power conflict between the US and China, rather than being at the mercy of the two. Combine this with his political willpower, prudence, and courage, and you begin to see how he can impact world events. He's the right guy at the right place at the right time. Yoon's vision has always stretched far beyond the Korean peninsula. Even before he was elected president, he articulated his vision for South Korea to become a global pivotal state. In a foreign affairs article he published, he said the following: South Korea should no longer be confined to the Korean peninsula, but rise to the challenge of being what I have described as a global pivotal state, one that advances freedom, peace, and prosperity through liberal democratic values and substantial cooperation. Leveraging South Korea's middle power status, Yoon seeks to work within the international system, to strengthen it, and to solve pressing global challenges. This puts him at odds with powers such as North Korea, China, and Russia, who seek to either oppose or undermine the international system. Yoon's vision of a harmonious network of like-minded allies would land him in Washington. This would prove consequential, for South Korea now under Yoon would have a harsher stance on North Korea. And although South Korea must maintain a delicate balance to not outrightly antagonize China, strengthening ties with the US puts South Korea against China in this great power conflict. Part of achieving Yoon's dream of a global pivotal state would be to restore relations with various countries. But the country which needed the most repair was the closest, Japan. South Korea and Japan are the United States' two closest allies in the Indo-Pacific. If they're against each other, then it becomes much more difficult to counter Chinese aggression in the region. Up until recently, bilateral relations have been ice cold. This discontent is rooted in history, over Japan's colonial rule of Korea, particularly wartime forced labor and the coercion of thousands of Korean women into sexual slavery, which today is euphemistically known as comfort women. It all went downhill when in 2018, South Korea's top court ordered Japanese companies to pay South Koreans forced to work in factories and mines during World War II. This ignited an already troubled relationship into a tit-for-tat trade war, which led to the lowest point in bilateral relations in decades, from 2018 to 2022. This was the disaster which Yoon inherited, but with support and encouragement from Washington, President Yoon would engage with his counterpart, Prime Minister Fumio Kishida, to begin the complicated process of mending ties, something which seemed unthinkable up until now. Yoon took a hit domestically and sacrificed public opinion to build a future-oriented relationship with Japan, rather than continue one which was stuck in the past. He achieved this by making a bold decision of finding an alternative solution to the 2018 ruling. Rather than have Japan compensate South Koreans, Yoon's government would create a fund to pay the victims of forced labor. At home, he received harsh criticism, if not outright rejection of the move. Yoon's opposition party called it the most humiliating diplomatic move since Korea lost its sovereignty to Japan in 1910. The decision is also being challenged in the courts, and Japan's refusal to contribute to the funds could possibly undermine progress. While some South Koreans protested, it would ultimately lead to warmer relations with Japan. And this is exactly what distinguishes Yoon from previous presidents: his willingness to accept that people were going to not like what he was going to do, but do it anyway. Sacrifice short-term gains for long-term goals. Shortly after this decision from Yoon, for the first time in nearly 12 years, a South Korean president visited Japan for a one-on-one meeting with the Japanese Prime Minister. In other words, it was the beginning of a new era for the two countries. It remains to be seen if the ghosts of the past have the possibility of stopping reconciliation in the present day, if the clear danger of nuclear annihilation can be superseded by historical animosity. As domestic politics can get in the way for both countries, there's certainly is room for disaster. In South Korea, opposition to the fund faces rejection from the public and courts. Yoon's public approval remains consistently low. Japan also has its share of scandals and political corruption, leading the public to lose trust in its institutions. Both countries have also been struck by political violence, but the potential for peace and prosperity looms larger than that of tragedy and despair. It started with the courage of one man, and 2 years later, it has the possibility of making history, as a future-oriented South Korea-Japan alliance could be the crucial factor in the greater geopolitical struggle of our time. If you enjoyed this video, I'm coming out with a longer one, which goes into the deep history of these two countries, why Japan decided to become an aggressive power in the late 19th century, and how it almost conquered all of Asia. If you'd like to watch that, subscribe to my channel. Thanks for watching and have a great day.